Hello, I'm Mr. Vincent. This is a quick introduction to technology offer at Key Stage 4, covering sort of the structure of the two courses we offer and sort of revision techniques and bits and pieces that will help our Year 11s hopefully do well in their mocks and then their final exams. We're going to start with design technology. The structure of the course is that it's divided into two components. Each of those are worth 50%. Component one is the exam. That takes place at the end of Year 11. And that's something we prepare for from year 10 right the way through. Total of 100 marks in that paper. It's almost 2 hours they sit that paper for, but that gives them half their GCSE. The other half of the GCSE component two is called an NEA. It's a non-examined assessment. Essentially, it's a coursework piece. It's like an exam they take for 3/4 of a year. It starts in the June of year 10 and it goes through till approximately the half term in February of year 11, during which time they then have to come up with an idea for their own project, design, develop that, prototype it, test it, evaluate it at the end. And that's what they get the second half of their GCSE for. So as it turns out, the component two is actually completed before they actually get into component one. In terms of timescale, as I mentioned just now, component one is undertaken in June of year 11. The preparation, it goes right the way through the 2 years. We teach a lot of theory in year 10 and then we come back to it and sort of start revising that theory in year 11. There are components which we teach during year 11 as we go along. Those tend to be the more sort of design process related things as we get to that part in their NEA. The component two, as I said before, is started in June of year 10. So our current year 11s are already well into that at the moment. The design contexts for that are given by the exam board. So the essence is that the exam board push you in a certain direction, and then the students have to come up with a project of their own, which then meets the needs of that. They submit the portfolio as a digital portfolio. They use PowerPoint to put it together, and then we submit that. We also produce a printed copy, but that's more for safekeeping than anything else. That one doesn't really leave the school, unless we had a terrible incident where the digital version wasn't available, but the digital one is the one we would actually mark and send off. The interesting thing with this is that students have to complete this at school. It has to be completed under what we would call informal supervision, which means that I have to be able to say that the students in my class, they are completing that work of their own accord. They're not getting any additional help from anybody else. That's why we put on after school catch-up sessions, because if they're coming back to do catch-up, I'm still there. I can make sure that they're completing that work themselves. They're not getting any additional help. And what we can't do is to send them away over Christmas holidays and then for them to bring back a finished piece of coursework, because if we haven't seen it being developed, we can't sign it off to say that it's theirs. There is obviously elements of this, though, that they can do for home learning. So lots of research can be done at home and then bring that back in and use it. It can be the case if they've designed something at school and they just need to annotate that, we can do that sort of thing. They can come up with ideas at home and bring them in, and then they can develop them further at school. So there's elements that they can bring in there, but the actual component to itself has to be done under informal supervision. The exam board rules dictate that. In terms of revision for the subject, things that they will have is they do have access to textbooks at school. There are textbooks available. It's an Edexcel GCSE that we run. So if you are looking at buying a textbook for your son or daughter, then it will be a really good idea to make sure you get the right course. They're all similar, but they are all slightly different in the way that they work and the content. So the Edexcel is the course that we're offering here. We also have Seneca, which is an online learning resource. We use that in year 10 and we bring that back into year 11 for revision purposes. And that would be where we would set it as the class teacher, and they would then be able to complete those units at home. We can check it. It allows us to check understanding quite well. It allows them to kind of rag rate their understanding, see which areas they need to put a bit more work into. We will undertake as many practice exams as possible. Essentially, we'll probably do every practice exam at least twice, lead up to the GCSE. There's no substitute for actually putting them in an exam situation and giving them some papers to try. It allows them to learn the language of the exam, which is important, the command words which they use, and also just the idea of working under time pressure, and the types of questions, because there is a bit of a formula to the exam, and they sort of learn those types of questions. We do a lot of that, though, at the end of year 11. If we do it too early, they forget it. If we need to do it after the NEA is finished, really. So from that February half term, that's when we really dig into the exam prep, because that then means they can forget about their coursework. They can focus purely on the exam. They will have the knowledge they need already through the theory lessons. It's that exam preparation which we really try and hone after the February half term. They would be wise to start building themselves a revision pack as soon as possible. Now, individual students are going to prefer different methods of doing this. One thing I would suggest is that every student needs to do something. Whether it's mind maps, some students like to get sort of topics and map them all out so they can see them visually. Some students prefer to do revision cards and they write themselves questions that they then put the answers on the back and get people to test them. They will need to know processes, so sketches and diagrams of the various different industrial processes are useful. That's the sort of thing they're going to have to repeat in an exam without any preparation. So if you've already done it a couple of times for revision, then that will help you massively at that point. YouTube can be a great resource if you're looking at the right things. If you're looking at, say, processes that we can't show in school, so things like injection molding or offset lithography, we don't have the facilities, no school does, to show those. So YouTube videos we would use in class, and if they want to do that, that's great. Obviously, cat videos are a waste of time. So just make sure we're using YouTube properly. All the Year 11s in the design technology class have been given a rundown of the topics for their mock. And we've been through those in class, and we will spend some time in the preparation of that, actually going back into that a bit more detail. But the format of the exam is the same as a real exam, and I've included that on this slide here. So it will include 2 sections. Section A is focused on core knowledge. That means knowledge of all sorts of materials and all sorts of processes, but it's to a lower level, okay, or not such a depth. Section A includes four questions. As does section B, because there's 8 questions in the whole paper. Section B is slightly different, is that it's focused on a chosen material, and our chosen material is timbers. We find that's easier for students to engage with. It's one they're more familiar with. We use it more. They've used it themselves as well. So that's the material we choose for that, and they will be specifically around that. But they do tend to be process questions. Again, there's 4 questions in that part. All of the questions, all of those 8 questions will have multiple parts to them. Some questions might be large. They might have a 12-mark question, and maybe that's the whole thing. Some questions might have 6 2-mark questions and break it down in that way. Generally speaking, it's getting the marks on the longer questions that students struggle with, and so that's the thing that we're going to practice more when we get to the end of the NEA, because if you've got a 12-mark question, for instance, students are quite comfortable getting the first maybe 4 or 5 marks, but they might struggle to get the 10, 11, 12 marks, and that's where we need to bring that in and just get a bit of practice. Moving across now to the engineering course that we offer. It's not a GCSE, but it is a level 1-2 course, so it's worth exactly the same points, but it's called a vocational qualification. It's WJEC, which is the Welsh board that we teach. Now, that is divided actually into 3 units. So Unit 1 is a coursework unit, which is undertaken in school, which is a manufacturing project. The current Year 11s are already producing that one, and that should be finished just after Christmas. Unit 2 is 20%, and that's another coursework unit. That's a design project. Again, they complete that one in school. That will happen between Christmas and roughly the February half term, which means that the engineers will finish at about the same time as the design technology students in terms of their coursework and start the exam preparation somewhere around that February half term. Now, the exam for them is much earlier. Their exam, as you see on the slide here, is the 21st of May. So they have a little bit less time as preparation, whereas the design technology exam tends to be at the end of June. However, we build that in and we'll make sure that they obviously get the same experience that they need. Again, they'll be going through papers and bits and pieces like this ahead of time. Timescale, see, just work through that roughly. Unit 1 completed in the new year. Unit 2 is about February half term, and then provision for Unit 3, which is the exam after that. The format of the exam is slightly different. It's an hour and a half, so a little bit shorter. There's 80 marks in total. There's 4 questions with multiple parts for each question. Now, the exam board have changed the exam slightly this year. This is the first year of the new format. So although we have some information and some sample questions and things like this, we've never seen a full one of these exams go through. So this will be our first year of doing that. So obviously we're using previous exams, which were similar, but not quite the same, to kind of guide us on this one. There are textbooks available for this, and there is a new textbook that's just come out actually, which is quite good. I know that Mrs. Palmer has got a copy of this, and we're going to be giving copies of that to students to keep in school. But again, that could be purchased outside of school if you wanted to buy something for them that would help them. Websites such as technologystudent.com, quite good. BBC Bitesize is brilliant. It does kind of give all the information we need. It's particularly good for the design technology. Engineering, you sort of have to use the design technology one and pick the bits that you need to know. But for the information that's on there, it's very, very good quality. But sometimes for the engineering, you do have to kind of pick and choose the elements. So looking at the specification and then deciding which bits are relevant, because they don't have it as a separate one. That brings us